You are being lied to, and the lie is so comfortable, so warm, and so familiar that you have likely built your entire life around it. The lie is this: if you work hard, cut coupons, skip the morning latte, and stuff every spare dollar into a savings account, you will eventually be safe. You have been told that the path to wealth is a linear accumulation of paper, a fortress built brick by brick against the chaos of the world. But here is the terrifying, liberating truth that the banks and the traditional financial gurus are too polite to tell you. You cannot save your way to wealth, and you certainly cannot save your way to security. In fact, the very act of frantic, fearful saving is often the precise mechanism that keeps you poor. It sounds like madness, doesn't it? It sounds reckless. But this is not a call to abandon responsibility. It is a call to abandon the architecture of anxiety. This is a story about the difference between building a dam and planting a forest. It is the story of a man named Elias, who drowned in a dry room until he learned that money, like water, must flow to survive. Elias Vance was a man who did everything right, at least according to the rulebook of the American middle class. He lived in a modest split-level house in a suburb that was neither wealthy nor destitute, a town called Oakbridge where the lawns were manicured and the silence was heavy. Elias was 42 years old, and he carried the weight of the world in the tension of his jaw. He was a logistics manager for a mid-sized shipping firm, a job that required him to track the movement of boxes across the country, ensuring nothing was lost, nothing was wasted. He applied this same rigorous, suffocating logic to his own life. If you looked at Elias's spreadsheets, and he had many, color-coded and password-protected, you would see a masterpiece of austerity. He knew the price of milk at 3 different grocery stores and would drive the extra 3 miles to save 40 cents, convincing himself that this was victory. He set the thermostat to 62 degrees in the winter, wearing 2 sweaters indoors, shivering in the blue light of the television, telling his wife, Sarah, that this was how they secured their future. He was the architect of his own deprivation. He believed that every dollar unspent was a soldier recruited for his defense. But despite this militant discipline, despite the canceled streaming services and the brown bag lunches that tasted of stale bread and sacrifice, Elias felt a gnawing, hollow sensation in his gut. The number in his savings account grew, yes, but it grew with the agonizing slowness of a stalactite. And the world was getting faster. The grocery bill crept up by 12%. The insurance premiums jumped. The property taxes adjusted upward. Elias found himself running on a treadmill that was slowly inclining toward a vertical wall. He was saving, but he was losing purchasing power. He was hoarding ice cubes in a sauna, watching them melt and congratulating himself on the puddle that remained. This was the trap of the old thinking, the architecture of anxiety. Elias viewed money as a finite resource, a rare animal that had to be captured, caged, and guarded. He lived in a state of contraction. When you live in contraction, your world shrinks. You stop seeing opportunities because you are too busy looking for leaks. You stop seeing the horizon because you are staring at your shoes. The breaking point did not come with a bang, but with a drip. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of gray, relentless day that makes the bones ache. Elias came home to find a dark stain spreading across the ceiling of the living room. It was an ugly, Rorschach test of a stain, damp and menacing. He climbed into the attic, his flash. The water had bypassed his cheap fixes, soaked into the insulation, rotted the beams, and was now threatening the structural integrity of the house. The contractor, a man with hands like leather and eyes that had seen too many homeowners cry, gave him the estimate. It was a number that made Elias's knees weak. It was almost exactly the amount he had painfully, agonizingly scraped together over the last 4 years. The emergency fund, the holy grail of his sacrifice. For years of shivering in the cold, of skipping vacations, of saying no to his daughter's piano lessons, of eating cheap food. All of it, gone, in a single signature on a check to a roofing company. That night, Elias sat in his kitchen. The silence of the house was deafening. He looked at the checkbook. He looked at the spreadsheet. He realized with a terrifying clarity that he was back at zero. The safety was an illusion. The wall he had built was made of sand. He felt a rage building in him, a hot, bright anger directed not at the roof, but at the lie he had been living. He had played defense his whole life, and the offense, life, entropy, inflation, decay, had crushed him. He realized that saving for a rainy day simply guaranteed that it would eventually rain, and when it did, you would just get wet anyway. He was tired of getting wet. He was tired of the fear. The next morning, purely by chance, or perhaps by the magnetic pull of desperation, Elias found himself at the edge of town, walking through an old orchard that had recently been converted into a community nursery. He wasn't looking for plants. He was just looking for air that didn't smell like anxiety. He saw an old man kneeling in the dirt, pruning a small, gnarled apple tree. The man was Silas, a figure well known in Oakbridge, though mostly as an eccentric who had sold his successful construction business years ago to play in the dirt, as the locals whispered. Silas looked up, his face a map of deep lines etched by the sun. He saw Elias staring blankly at a row of saplings. "You look like a man who's trying to hold back the tide with a teaspoon," Silas said, his voice gravelly but warm. Elias blinked, startled. He usually avoided strangers, fearing they might try to sell him something. But he was empty now. He had nothing left to protect. So he poured it out. He told Silas about the roof, about the 4 years of sacrifice, about the zero balance, about the unfairness of it all. Silas listened, clipping a dead branch with a sharp snip. He stood up, wiping the soil from his knees. "The problem, son," Silas said, pointing to a rain barrel near the shed, "is that you're treating your money like water in a cistern." Elias frowned. "That's what you're supposed to do. You store it. You keep it safe." "No," Silas corrected gently. "Water in a cistern goes stale. It evaporates. Mosquitoes breed in it. And eventually, the cistern cracks, and the water leaks out. That's what happened to you. You hoarded your energy, your potential, in a dead container. You were banking on stagnation." Silas gestured toward a small creek that ran along the edge of the property, bubbling over rocks, clear and fast. "That water," he pointed, "is alive. It flows. It turns the wheel at the old mill down the road. It irrigates the fields. It feeds the trees. It comes back as rain. It's a cycle. You, my friend, are trying to be a lake, but you need to be a river." This was the window of revelation. The metaphor struck Elias with the force of a physical blow. He had been static. He had been trying to freeze time by freezing his assets. But the economy, like nature, is dynamic. Inflation is the evaporation. Emergencies are the leaks. By keeping his money still, he was subjecting it to the laws of decay. "Good," Silas smiled, and it was a wolfish, daring smile. "Now you can stop protecting the pile and start planting seeds. You don't need $1 million to start. You need a seed. A seed is small. It's vulnerable, but it has the code of a forest inside it." The shift in mindset was agonizing. It required Elias to move from a philosophy of scarcity, where every dollar spent is a dollar lost, to a philosophy of abundance, where every dollar spent is an employee hired to do a job. The next few weeks were the rebellion of small steps. Elias didn't have capital, but he had credit, and more importantly, he had a new pair of eyes. He stopped looking for coupons and started looking for inefficiencies. He stopped asking, "How can I save $5?" and started asking, "How can I create $50?" He looked at his own neighborhood. Oakbridge was full of people just like him. Tired, overworked, neglecting the maintenance of their homes because they were too exhausted. He saw the dirty driveways, the moss-covered sidings, the graying fences. In his old life, he would have seen this as just the way things are. Now he saw a market. Elias did something that made his stomach churn with nausea. He took the last $500 he had access to, money from a credit card cash advance, a terrifying sin in his old Bible, and he didn't put it in the bank. He bought a high-quality, industrial-grade pressure washer. Not the cheap plastic one from the discount aisle, but a beast of a machine. He bought cleaning solutions. He bought a ladder. Sarah, his wife, looked at him as if he had joined a cult. "We need to save that money for the water bill," she argued, fear evident in her eyes. "We can't save the water bill," Elias said, his voice trembling but firm. "We have to grow the water bill." It was a Saturday morning when he started. He didn't ask for permission. He went to his neighbor, Mrs. Gable, an elderly widow whose driveway was black with mold and oil. He offered to clean it for free. "I'm testing my equipment," he lied. He spent 4 hours blasting away the grime of a decade. When he finished, the concrete shone white in the sun, bright and clean. It looked like a new house. Mrs. Gable was so delighted she insisted on paying him $100. She told the neighbor across the street. Elias felt a surge of electricity that had nothing to do with the machine. He had converted his labor and a small capital investment into immediate cash flow. But more importantly, he had created value. He hadn't hoarded, he had improved. The internal struggle was fierce. Every time he bought gas for the machine, his old instinct screamed that he was losing money. But he forced himself to look at the math differently. The gas cost $4. The job paid $150. The return on investment was massive. He was no longer a victim of inflation. He was surfing on top of it. As spring turned to summer, Elias's weekends changed. He wasn't watching TV in 2 sweaters anymore. He was outside, sweating, moving, interacting. He began to see the scaling and shift. He realized that his time was the bottleneck. He could only wash so many houses. So, instead of saving the profits from the first month, about $2,000, he didn't put it in the emergency fund. He committed another heresy. He hired a teenager from the neighborhood, a hardworking kid named Leo who wanted to buy a car. Elias bought a second machine. He taught Leo the standard of quality. Now, Elias was earning money while he was at his logistics job. He had built a small system. The stream was flowing. But the psychological shift was more profound than the extra income. Elias walked differently. He stood taller at his corporate job. He realized that his employer was just a customer, not his master. If he lost his job, he wouldn't die. He had a skill. He had equipment. He had a reputation. The safety he had sought for years through deprivation was suddenly there, but it didn't come from a bank balance. It came from his own agency. He began to reinvest aggressively. He didn't stop at pressure washing. He saw that people needed their gutters cleaned. He bought the tools. He saw they needed mulch laid. He partnered with Silas to source the best mulch. He wasn't just a guy with a hose anymore. He was Vance Property Care. He was a business. The community began to view him differently. He wasn't the guy who haggled over the price of a used lawnmower at a garage sale. He was the guy who sponsored the local Little League team, a marketing expense, he realized, not a donation. He was generating gravity. Opportunities came to him. A local real estate agent asked if he could prep houses for sale. A property management company offered him a contract for an apartment complex. Elias sat down with Sarah one evening, a year after the roof collapse. The spreadsheet was open, but the columns were different. He wasn't tracking coffee savings. He was tracking asset allocation and revenue growth. "We have $10,000 in the business account," Sarah said, sounding stunned. "Should we move it to a savings account to keep it safe?" Elias smiled, and in that moment, he channeled Silas. "No," he said. "If we put it in a savings account, it falls asleep. We need to wake it up. We're going to buy a trailer so we can haul more equipment. We're going to invest in a marketing course so I can learn how to run ads. We are going to feed the river." This brought them to the philosophy of security. Elias had learned the 3 pillars of the new financial mindset. First, security is not static. It is dynamic. A ship is safe in the harbor, but that is not what ships are built for, and eventually, the hull will rot in the still water. True safety comes from the ability to navigate the ocean. Elias realized that job security was a myth. Income security was the reality, and income security came from having multiple streams, multiple clients, and the ability to generate value on demand. Second, frugality without production is merely slow starvation. There is a mathematical limit to how much you can cut costs. You can only cut to zero, but there is no theoretical limit to how much you can earn. The energy he used to spend worrying about the price of eggs was now spent thinking about how to add value to a client's property. The mental bandwidth he freed up was worth more than the dollars he had saved. Third, wealth is a relationship, not an object. When he hoarded, he was isolated. When he invested and built a business, he was connected. He knew his neighbors. He provided livelihoods for Leo and 2 other employees. He supported local suppliers. His money was circulating, and because it was circulating, it kept coming back to him, often multiplied. He was part of the ecosystem now, not a rock sitting at the bottom of the stream. The transformation wasn't just financial, it was spiritual. Elias realized that the reason he couldn't save money before was that he was trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. The hole was inflation, cost of living, and the unpredictability of life. No matter how fast he poured, saved, the hole drained it. By building a business, an asset, he had built a tap that poured faster than the leak. Eventually, he fixed the leak too, not by being cheap, but by buying higher quality goods that lasted longer, because he could finally afford them. He stood in his backyard. Elias understood now that the nest egg concept was flawed. Birds don't just sit on eggs. They build nests, they fly, they hunt. They are active. The passive life was a trap. The active life was the only true security. So, here is the message for you. Listening to this in your car, or your kitchen, or the quiet desperation of your own cubicle. The reason you cannot save money is not because you are buying too many lattes. It is not because you aren't disciplined enough. It is because you are playing a game that is rigged against the static player. You are trying to build a wall against a rising tide. Stop building the wall. The water will always win. Instead, learn to swim. Learn to build a boat. Learn to harness the power of the current. Take that small amount of money you are terrified to lose and risk it on yourself. Buy the tool. Take the course. Start the side hustle. Plant the seed. It will be scary. You will feel the wind on your face, and you will miss the stagnant warmth of your comfort zone. But the comfort zone is a coffin. Don't ask how much will this cost me. Ask what will this produce for me. Don't ask is this safe? Ask is this alive? The economy is a living, breathing thing. You cannot hide from it. You must participate in it. You must move from being a storage unit for currency to being a conductor of value. That is the only way to break the cycle. That is the only way to truly save, by growing. Stop hoarding the seeds in the dark, waiting for a winter that never ends. Go outside. The soil is ready. The sun is up. Throw the seeds into the ground. Watch them die to their shell so they can be born as trees. This is the only way to build a forest. This is the only way to be free. Stop building walls. Start planting seeds.